Hey, it's Mo Ari,
And Tiffany.
and you're listening to the hashtag Love Goals podcast. Before we get into this episode, I just want you to remember that every human, regardless of identity, needs these three things: belonging, authenticity, and love.
And after a decade of partnership, we've learned to co-create these things and so much more.
So, from wherever you're listening, we're going to go on a journey of becoming our own hashtag Love Goals. Now, let's get into this episode. Hey, it's Mo Ari.
And Tiffany.
And you're listening to the hashtag Love Goals podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank y'all.
So, we've been talking a lot about finances, and I think this is such an important episode for us because we've spent a lot of time thinking about money. And I think even in our community, so many of us have generational narratives around money that we might not even be that in tune with or in touch with. We might not understand how much that's impacting how we show up with regard to money. And I think in relationships, it ends up being extremely important that we have conversations around money going into the relationship and at various points. Of course, it looks different along the way, but talking about money, I think I know, talking about money, I know ends up being a source of some difficulty, but it also can be a source of a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
This is not a conversation about how much debt people have or don't have. You know, you're talking to two people or you're listening to two people who've gone to grad school, have student loans and stuff. So we're not getting into that. The foundation of this conversation, I think we really want to come from this particular place is that we all have inherited some personal relationship to money and value in association with value. And particularly for people who descended from slaves in America,
Yes.
hundreds of years now, hundreds of years at this point, there was a value associated with our physical person
Yep.
associated with money.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have been outliving that history.
Yeah.
We have been healing that. We have been generationally changing that. It's been, I want to say, like a boom of entrepreneurship,
So many.
which is a shift in mentality because it's us finally understanding, or maybe it's not finally understanding, but having the opportunity in this lifetime to be able to have ownership over
Yeah.
ourselves, which means that our worth is priceless.
Yeah.
It shifts our internal, it has shifted for me my own internal narrative about value. And I don't think I became aware until around 2020 sometime how much of my own personal value was associated with how much money I could make. And I tapped into the ancestors via meditations and, thinking about the journeys they've walked, my relationship with my grandmother. And I realized that not only had I attached that to my personal value, how much money I could make, it was almost like the price over my head. And I saw myself standing in like, a slave market, so to speak, and having a price over my head. And it made me realize that a lot of times I'm associating how much money I can make with my own worth. So a lot of times I was probably coming into our relationship with those feelings of, am I worthy? Am I not worthy based on how much money I can bring, especially as a provider, as somebody who sees himself as like wanting to take care of their family, not just like as a masculine person. I'm saying as a provider. That's the identity separate from being a masculine person. You can be a provider and be a feminine identified person. So I want to say that very clearly. But as Black people, all of us are providers. All of us share in that dream for the most part of leaving something of generational wealth and
Yes.
abundance, not just
Yeah.
financially, but abundantly for the next generation. And so I wanted to set up this conversation and start us talking from that frame of how
Yeah.
much we bring into relationships with regard to money that has nothing to do with us, but everything to do with us generationally, how much we're healing by having these kinds of conversations, by being able to talk about money in a relationship and unattach it from our worth and our value. So the relationship with money ends up being very, very important.
Right.
I want to hear from you because I know starting out in our relationship, we had conversations early on. Now, I will
Yeah.
say it was easier because neither one of us had a lot of dollar signs that had
Mm-mm.
manifested in our bank account, but we had
Exactly.
abundance in other ways.
Yes, of course.
But so in the beginning, I felt like for me, it was easy to have these conversations. But hearing from you and what I know about your story,
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like it was easy for you to
Mm-mm.
think about joining a bank account, whether it was $5 or $500 in there.
No, it was not easy, and I feel like talking about finances and money, like, outside of myself, so talking about intentional partnership had to be one of the most anxiety-inducing conversations or moments ever. And I wouldn't say that it was you that put pressure on me or you that was judging me or any of that. Like, it honestly was my own story, like you're saying, or my own relationship. And while you were talking, I was like really trying to figure out what exactly that story was. And I feel like based on my family or based on my community, there has always been this challenge with dreaming.
Mm,
There's always been this challenge with honestly just dreaming big or
mhm.
dreaming more than just the everyday, the mundane, the okay, this is what everybody has been doing for years and years and years. And a lot of times, I feel like that dream was attached to money.
Yeah,
I feel like that dream was attached to having a bigger house or having a job that paid a particular amount or any of these things that we attach to money.
yeah.
So if you have a challenge with dreaming and you're attaching that with money,
Say more about that. When you
yeah,
say you have a challenge, they had a challenge with dreaming and they attached it to money.
yeah,
Make the attachment, make the bridge for us so that we know what that
yeah.
attachment
Okay,
was.
so if you have, I'll use myself as an example. Sometimes I'll sit, you've asked me and you've said like, "What's your dream? Like, what are
Mhm.
your dreams?"
That sounds like something I'd ask.
Yeah. What do you dream? And I feel like it's very a lot of times it's hard for me to answer that question.
Mm,
It's hard for me
mm,
not because I don't have dreams, but because I feel like I totally block off anything related to money,
mm.
anything related to like, one day I want to make X amount of money from this thing, or
Yeah,
one day I want to live in this blank house worth
yeah.
this amount of money. And I feel like it
Mm,
has because of that, I grew up in a family or around a community that was very avoidant
mhm.
related to anything talking about money. If
Yeah,
it had anything to do with money,
yeah,
because we were not pushing ourselves to dream,
yeah.
then it's kind of like you just block out that whole money finance
Interesting.
conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I feel like I just because I was avoidant, then I wasn't even really curious about the conversations around money. I was just like, anxiety, like,
Mhm.
no, can't.
Yeah,
Even in grad school, like having, I mean, I didn't have a full home and things, but there were bills that I was responsible for, right?
yeah.
And I would always pay my bills on time, but I was probably paying them the day before they were due, right?
Mm,
Not because I didn't have the money,
yeah,
not because, I didn't have access to go pay like any of that. It was just the stress or the
yeah,
anxiety I felt
yeah,
with that
yeah.
process.
And it's okay to pay your bills
Yeah. No,
the day before
right.
they're due. That's still,
Right.
like, early. First of all, they are not owed their money until the due date.
That is true.
Because what are we doing paying people in advance
That's
of their
true.
okay.
That's true, but given the person that I am a person who likes to be prepared
You like
or
being
like
early.
and like being early, and so for it to be this arena, like the finance arena where I'm not doing it, then it just clued me into probably something else that might be going on there
Mhm.
for me.
Yeah.
So I will say, like, to tie this in a bow, my relationship or my money story has been very avoidant.
Well, tell me, before you tie it up,
Yeah,
because I think that I do wanna go back into the family thing because I
yeah,
wanna understand that more because how you've shared it has
Mhm.
been like right now in this moment is what I'm hearing you saying is
Mhm.
that there was difficulty with dreaming because most of the dreams that you would aspire toward had some type of monetary thing
Yeah.
attached to
Yeah.
it. Not just and it's interesting that the perspective would be about how much you needed to spend,
Mhm.
but not dreams where you could potentially gain a
Yeah,
lot.
exactly.
But beyond that, I'm wanting to understand what you think or why you think those stories got embedded in your family because wanting to offer compassion to you and your family for your family of origin for having those particular narratives, it didn't just
Mhm.
happen. And I think that there are probably plenty of people, let's say, that are listening that
Mhm.
might relate
Yeah.
to this feeling like inability to dream or haven't really created dreams or aspirations.
Mhm.
What maybe generally do you think has been contributed to that or the circumstance that
Mm.
created that?
I mean, I think that's a great question, and I feel like if it feels like in a lot of these instances, dreams were deferred
Mm,
for people in my family. Like, you
mhm.
know, you're going to school, you wanna be let's say you wanna be a doctor. You're going to school, you end up pregnant, right? You gotta stay
Yeah,
out of school,
yeah,
then you have to get a job. Like, these circumstances that
yeah,
happen that kind of defer your dreams, and then it gets increasingly more difficult to
yeah,
get back to the dream once it's
yeah,
deferred.
yeah,
And of course, we make lemonade out of lemons and, we do all of these things when we kind of take different paths. But I feel like dreams being deferred, it can kind of take you down this spiral. Not, I won't even say a spiral because it doesn't have to be downward. It can take you this different path.
yeah. So
w-
deferred,
Right,
like you're saying, a
deferred.
detour.
Right, where you could sometimes lose sight of your dream. You could
Mhm,
still be happy and fulfilled, but that initial dream that might
mhm.
have been attached
Yeah,
to these monetary things that we're talking about, I feel like for a
yeah,
lot of people in my family, the dream
yeah,
was deferred and then maybe there was a lost connection to what that
yeah,
dream was.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for
Uh-huh.
clarifying.
Yeah, so I know it probably feels roundabout to say like, "Oh, we have challenges with dreaming, and so then that's attached to money." But I feel like my story around money has just always been very avoidant,
Mhm.
very I just approach it with so much anxiety, and it doesn't have to be. Like, early at the beginning of the conversation, you were saying how these conversations can be exciting, and I'm like, "How?" Like, this is so it can just I approach these things, or I have approached these things with such stress and such like, "Oh, we gotta figure this out." And I think it's somewhat rooted in, like, some scarcity there, if I'm
Yeah, for
honest.
sure.
Like, "Oh my god, is it gonna be enough? Like, do I have enough? Will there
Mhm,
be enough in the
mhm.
future?"
And I think that's what I'm talking about when I get into the generational,
Mhm.
traumas that have created particular
Yeah.
narratives
Mhm.
around money.
Mhm.
Because at times in the past few hundred years, I'm sure there wasn't enough. Or
No.
it was like limited resources shared amongst hundreds
Yeah.
of people. The literal last and
Mhm.
bottom feeders
Mhm.
were given to
Mhm.
our people. And so
Yeah.
that was the circumstance. We have outlived those
Mhm.
circumstances. We have gone on to see generations of descendants not have those same circumstances, but those same mindsets have carried on
Yes.
because that trauma is so deep.
It's deep.
And if you're a millennial listening to this, we are here at the we're those turn of the century babies that
Mhm.
came in the early 90s and we in probably the mid to late
Mhm.
80s
Mhm.
to shake things up
Mhm.
because we're here to heal those things.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're here to ensure that our descendants onward don't have the same mindsets that they're carrying on because the resources and opportunities are different.
Yeah.
We playing a different game.
Yeah.
Our ancestors played as long as they could to get us to where we are, and we are like literally standing right in front of the goal. Are we gonna make the shot?
Mhm.
Are we gonna like, are we gonna pass?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that I mean, I want all of us to make our shot.
Mhm.
I want
Mhm.
all of us to never not take those kinds of
Yeah.
opportunities. Um, so as we are here thinking like generations
Mhm.
removed from slavery, and we're having these conversations
Mhm.
about value as it's
Yeah.
attached to money,
Yeah.
we're understanding that we're coming into a relationship with all of these kinds of understandings, whether they're scarcity or not.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
these can be what this all of this can be what is behind our relationship with money. So
Mhm.
think, had we not had this conversation, what kind of conversation might we be having about a spending plan, or
Yeah.
talking about our debt or anything
Mhm.
like that? How
Mhm.
much shame might a person like
Mhm.
Tiffany have if she has to
Yes.
open up about
Exactly.
her student loan debt, but she
Mhm.
hasn't talked about where these narratives even come
Exactly.
from. That's why
Exactly.
I think we really want to have this episode where we are inviting you into these foundational
Mhm.
conversations about where your money story
Yeah.
even begins
Mhm.
prior to having conversations about finances.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I feel that that's like so important before we jump into all these other resources
Yeah.
and talking about how to really do finances well
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
That we really take a look at our personal value and whether or not we've
Yes.
associated a lot of that with money. In our society, it would be hard not to because of the generational things that we've
Mhm.
inherited.
Mhm.
I'm just reminding us that we're here to free it up.
Yeah.
We're here to clear it up. We're here to dream,
Mhm.
to not just dream about
Mhm.
things you want to buy or
Mhm.
consume with your money.
Mhm. Mhm.
Think about things you want to create.
Yep.
Think about things that will gain you income. Dream about things that will
Mhm.
create
Mhm.
income for your descendants long after
Yeah.
you're gone.
Yeah.
That's the kind of why that brings all of your manifestations to life.
Mhm. Mhm.
Money isn't just a currency.
Right. Right.
It is used for currency, but it's a material form of abundance.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll say this and I'm gonna let Tiffany talk here. Something that I had to get clear about was that I grew up thinking that people with money were different than me.
Mm.
I grew up thinking, and that wasn't necessarily anybody else's doing.
Yeah.
It was that I didn't know people that were millionaires or anything
Mhm.
like that, or not to my knowledge. And so
Mhm.
I was thinking that that was just gonna miss me in this
Yeah.
lifetime. I
Yep.
didn't grow up in that circumstance, so that wasn't gonna
Mhm.
be me. And so often we have that mindset, like if you're born in a certain circumstance, you're gonna stay there. The
Mhm.
thing that keeps people in certain circumstances is their mindset.
Mhm. Yep.
We have the ability to change our circumstances at any point in time. You want to go move to another part of the country, live a different life, you can do that.
Mhm.
In this generation, we couldn't
Mhm.
before, but those same thoughts about about our behaviors or our lives are that are those limiting beliefs that we had in prior generations,
Yeah.
we're still carrying them on.
Mhm.
We're still operating like we can't leave the plantation, so
Yep.
we won't leave that town that we've been in for 4 generations, knowing good
Mhm.
and well we have dreams of being in the big city and being a Broadway performer,
Exactly.
but we won't
Exactly.
do it.
Right.
So I think that the challenge then is for us to actually make the changes now that
Mhm.
will create the lives that we really want,
Right.
especially around money.
Yep.
Those people with money are not different than us,
Mhm.
or people with more money or the kind of money that you want to be
Yeah.
making are not different than you.
Mhm.
They're not better than you. We've associated so much bad, good, this, that. Like I often
Yeah.
thought that they were not as good people,
Mhm.
not philanthropic,
Mhm.
not philanthropic,
Mhm.
not caring about people
Exactly.
who have less money.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Mhm.
All of those stories that and those messages we get about us versus them, it's just
Mm.
not true.
Yeah.
Everybody has a choice with how they're going to utilize their life, their energy, their currency, what
Mhm.
they're going to manifest, what they're going to create. It does not matter where you start.
Yep.
Your descendants will benefit from you making positive
Mhm.
change in your relationship
Exactly.
to money.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel 100% the same way, and I think growing up in a family or a community, like I'm saying, that was very avoidant of money, we didn't talk about it. I didn't understand the basics of it. I didn't even know how to begin to talk about a spending plan or what it would look like to have, a joint account, for instance. And so I think that has really allowed me to see the fruits of being intentional and
Yeah.
having those conversations. Like, so intentional to the point where you're having these conversations, no matter how anxiety inducing it is,
Yeah.
about what your debt is.
Yeah.
And removing the shame, I feel like
Yeah.
there was just so much shame around
Yeah.
your debt, or there was just so much shame about not having it, like not
Yeah.
having, the money or the resources when you wanted to do certain things. So again, you avoid it, you don't talk
Yeah.
about it, but then you pass down this.
And even if you have the resources, but you're not intentional about talking
Right.
about it, then you're not co-creating anything.
Exactly. And yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're passing down this repeated, like, okay,
We don't talk
we're
about
gonna talk
that.
about it. So then there's again no intention.
No
No intention.
intention.
No intention. And then after a while, it's just not the most hopeful thing. And if you're wanting to create partnership and healthy partnership where, however you want to set up your things, joint account, not joint account, whatever you do, there has to be some level of intention or shared understanding or
The
shared vision.
utmost intention. When we think about,
Yes.
as a family therapist, they say, well, in the early 2000s, whatever, it was like 50% of marriages end in divorce, all of those
Mhm.
headlines. Some of the top cited reasons, number one was always finances.
Mm,
It
I believe
wasn't
it.
cheating, it wasn't the kids, it was finances.
Mm.
I mean, that should tell you how many people in America have been
Mhm.
struggling, but I will
Mhm.
get off of a pedestal about that. But then
Yeah.
number 2, well, that's number 1, should tell
Mhm.
you about America,
Mhm.
but number 2, I think it says a lot about how hard it was to talk about these things, and how much of people's personal value was associated with finances at the time. So that make these conversations being that challenging, or any conflict related to it ends up making it feel like we shouldn't even be together.
Mhm.
This is not
Mhm.
a relationship where I'm valued, or whatever
Yeah.
the thing is.
Yeah.
It was that difficult.
Mhm.
The number one reason.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it just really speaks again, like you're saying, to that intention that is necessary in having these conversations and sharing your own story about money. It gives perspective. Like if I'm saying to you, Mo, we didn't talk about money in my household. If I then come to the relationship and, let's say I buy something, right? Like, I don't know, a new bag, right?
Mhm.
I'm not telling you about it. I'm not trying to be sneaky. I'm not trying to hide it, but we just did not talk about money or what that would look like
Mhm.
or any of these things. So I think when you come to the relationship and you have these intentional conversations about what is your money story, what are you bringing from your family, it gives you perspective as to the
Mhm.
behavior of the other person, but then it allows for you to create or
Mhm.
co-create what
Yeah.
that will look like in your relationship
Yeah, and
currently.
set new standards for the
Exactly.
relationship, and so
Exactly.
that you can build some generational wealth together,
Exactly.
so that you can build, uh, together what you want your money
Mhm.
story to be moving
Mhm.
forward. We don't
Mhm.
wanna just be passing along these money stories, we wanna be
No.
intentional. "Okay,
Exactly.
this is the narrative we're gonna create for our kids and their
Yeah.
kids and their kids." So that that
Mhm.
money story lives long after us, and that they can come back and tweak it and do whatever they need to do with
Mhm.
it, but we're not gonna kick the can down the road. We're
Mhm.
actually gonna move the ball
Moving
forward,
forward.
and,
Yeah.
I think that that's so important
Mhm.
for us to have these intentional
Yep.
conversations, to come together and really talk with one another about what it is that we want to create.
Yes, and then also with saying that, also not projecting those money stories onto your partner.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, I have all of these things around money, but at the point where there's a $9 pair of earrings sitting in the Amazon cart, like, it's on me that I haven't ordered it. I'm not gonna go project and be like, you said I couldn't buy this thing. Like, it's legitimately on me. And so
Yeah.
understanding that too, like, no, this is my stuff. I'm not buying
Yeah.
this because of X, not
Yeah.
because of anything that has to do with my
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, getting out of just viewing the money story from a consumer mindset.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of your stuff is wrapped up
Mhm.
in, can I buy something or not buy
Exactly.
something?
Yeah.
So I think that that says a lot about what was happening for you
Mhm.
generationally.
Mhm.
A lot of my stuff comes up around, again, how much money can I make? How much money will I
Mm.
allow myself to make?
Got it. Okay.
Will I pro am I going to take the risk associated with putting myself out there, living authentically, knowing that that's going to make me the
Mhm.
kind of wealth I
Mhm.
want to create? Or am I going to go for what seems easier because it's a sure thing?
Yeah.
And in so many instances where I said, no, I'm not going to go after what seems like a sure thing. I'm going to go after what's authentic and true to me. I
Exactly.
made double what I was going
Exactly.
to make off of that
Exactly. Exactly.
other thing that would seem sure.
Mhm.
So I think it's challenging these money stories, really getting to the heart of where it came from. I know there were generations of people before me that were sitting there like,
Yeah.
my value is associated with this dollar. I'm gonna go with what's the short thing so I don't end up
Mhm.
with nothing because then I'll feel like nothing. And
Mhm.
I was like, this money don't make me. I can make more of that.
Yeah.
I can't
Right.
make more of me. So it
Mhm.
has to be valuable. It has to be worth my time.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Time is money. We're gonna pause this episode
Yes.
because we could really get into that. When
Yeah.
I say time is money, I mean time is a currency.
Yep.
It's an energy exchange. It's valuable just like we value money. So that's why this lifetime is so valuable because we
Mhm.
came here to do some powerful
Yep.
things. And money is but one of those things that we came
Mhm.
here to manifest in this realm and
Yeah.
create.
Yeah.
There's abundance of all kinds. And
Mhm.
time is one of our most valuable resources that we've been granted in this life to do some magic with.
Exactly.
So thank you all so much for listening to us and talking
Yes.
to us about your money stories. Anything you wanted to close everybody out with, Tiff?
I will just say, like, we all have these stories. Don't judge yourself for these stories. Just
Yeah.
have the conversations. Like, we're all about creating your own love goals. Our vision, our
Mhm.
financial vision for our relationship might not look like yours, and that's okay. Do what
Yeah.
works for your relationship, have those conversations, and I guarantee you that if there's intention there, you're gonna get some good things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have other episodes where we're talking specifically about things that we've done, tools we've used that
Mhm.
were helpful in
Yeah.
creating a financial plan. But we really wanted this episode to be about starting at the very beginning, getting to
Mhm.
those inherited beliefs around
Yeah.
finances so that we can even come to the table where we're actually starting to co-create
Mhm.
on the same place and already having built some compassion and
Yeah.
some understanding of one another and where they're coming from. Otherwise, when you sit down and have those conversations, a lot of times you'll feel like you got hit in the face. So
Exactly.
we don't want anything like that,
Absolutely.
you know.
Mm.
So thank you all so much for listening. This has been hashtag Love Goals Podcast with Mo
And
Ari. Have
Tiffany.
a great day and be well.
Bye. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.
If you want your question featured in an upcoming episode of the hashtag Love Goals Podcast, go ahead and send your question to lovegoalspodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website at lovegoalspodcast.com and follow us on Instagram at Love Goals Podcast. We look forward to hearing from you soon.